Good evening. This is Bible Answers, and I'm Evan Gregory. We're going to be continuing looking at John chapter 9. Tonight, we're going to plan on finishing it up. And as always, this is brought to you by the North Columbus Church of Christ, located in Columbus, Mississippi. Our website scrolling below me is northcolumbuschristians.com. And we also have a YouTube page, which is North Columbus Church of Christ, and you can find previous videos there. And as always, this is a live show as well. So if you got a question or comment, feel free to leave that here. So last week, we looked at the first 23 verses of chapter 9. And basically, what the main gist of what we're seeing is a blind man that's being healed. And as we got closer to where we finished up last week, we see where there is some contention over him being healed. The leaders, Jewish leaders, definitely don't like the fact they just kind of just overlooked the fact that a blind man was healed, but are stuck on the fact that he was healed on the Sabbath. And according to them, that would be against the law. And so we start off in verses 20, again in verse 24. So also the parents of this man that was healed was called. They didn't want to answer for this man because they were scared that they might be cast out of the synagogue. And so we start off in verses 20. Let's go back to verse 23. Yeah, they would be put out of the synagogue if they confessed that he was the Christ. That was the end of 23. And so we start off in verse 24. And we read verses 24 through 29. It says, So they again called the man who was blind and said to him, Give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Then they said to him again, What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from. So the leaders, the Pharisees, they're speaking to the man that was healed here. And so they called that man, again, he was blind, and they said to him, Give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. So they're saying that Jesus is a sinner. We know that he's a sinner. And it's basically, they're basically saying, Tell us the truth. We're not in with this guy. Something's got to be, something's up here. And so we see how this formerly blind man responds. He says, basically he's saying that I don't know about this, who this guy is, but he healed me. I was blind, now I see. Doesn't matter what the Jewish leaders are saying. This is what I do know. And they ask him how he does it, how they do it. He responds, I've already told you. He told him to go down. He put the clay on his eyes, and he went down into the water and washed and was healed. And so I think his response after this was really just really getting under the skin of the leaders here by him saying, why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? You can just kind of pick, or at least I can picture it, and just hearing that they're against this man. They don't want anything to do with Jesus, and yet he's asking them, do they want to become his disciples? And so we see that they revile him, and he says, you are his disciples, but we are Moses' disciples. Okay, so you're with him. We think, and he's not. The man is not committed to following Jesus. He's not a true disciple in that sense. The guy's just stating the facts. He's saying this is what he did. He didn't really know. He don't know much about that. He didn't know much about Jesus, apparently. He just knows that he was healed, but yet these people are saying that he is his disciple, and they're contrasting that with their being Moses' disciples, or followers of the law. Notice what they said. It says, "We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from." So there's the difference there. We know God spoke to Moses. We don't know about this guy. What's interesting here is they say we don't know where he is from. Uh, it it's interesting here because if we go back to John chapter 7, I believe it's in verse 22, they contradict this statement. They will say, "Well, we do know where he is from." But the Messiah is going to come from somewhere we don't know. And so, in that sense, if you go look back at that, they are admitting that they don't know where he is from and kind of lining up to what they would expect the Messiah to be. So very interesting there. But they, in chapter 7, they're contradicting what is being said here in chapter 9. In chapter 7, they said, "Well, we do know where he's from." Now they're saying we don't know where he's from. So the flip-flopping and contradicting and just kind of just saying whatever, or just it almost seems like they're just trying to throw whatever sticks to the wall, or hoping that it sticks, and going along with it. So we see the problems for the leaders, the Pharisees, and how they go about trying to combat what Jesus is teaching. So this man is blinded. They said, "We don't have anything to do with him. Where Moses' disciples were better, we're legit. He's not legit." Takes us to verses 30 through 34. It says, "The man answered and said to them, 'Why, this is a marvelous thing that you do not know where he's from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing.' They answered and said to him, 'You are completely born in sins, and are you teaching us?' And they cast him out." And so this formerly blind man, he understands. He gets it. You don't know where he's from, yet he has opened my eyes. What he's saying is, exactly where he's from. He's a man of God. He's from God. Uh, Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. So the leaders are accusing Jesus of being a sinner. This man is coming back and says, "We know that God doesn't hear sinners." If this man was a sinner, how could he do these things? How could he be working actively against God's will, yet still being able to perform these miracles? Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. It couldn't be done. And so, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. So this man, and I think we mentioned this several times over the last few chapters in John, but the purpose of the miracles were to validate the word that was being spoken. And so anybody could just show up and say, "I'm the Messiah, you ought to follow me." But what separates Jesus, and you think back to the prophets, the apostles later on, what separates these men from just anybody is that they were able to perform miracles. We see Jesus here performing these miracles. And so we go into the book of Hebrews, and that that's basically God verifying or witnessing to who these people are by these miracles. And so this man understands that he has put two and two together, that if this guy's performing these miracles, he can only be, God is on his side. He can only be from God. And so if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. It is interesting how we see this man understands this, but we see all these others just won't accept that. That the Pharisees are so caught up, well, he did this on the Sabbath. And it is fascinating to me that it's like they just completely avoid the idea that this guy just healed a blind man, or he performed some notable miracle that could not be I mean, just cannot be explained at all. And yet they say, well, he performed it on the Sabbath, and they were trying to get him on that. Well, he did it on the Sabbath. He sinned, therefore he's not from God. This man says, well, if he was not from God, he couldn't do these things, period. And so they answered and they said, you were completely born in sins and you are teaching us. He's saying that. And so this goes back to uh, when we see where the people think that this blind man was, or him being born blind, it was a result of some sin, or, it was the consequences of somebody's actions. And I think that's what we see being borne out again here. He says, you are completely born in sins. Your ailment was a result of some sin, and yet you are teaching us. You see the pride in these individuals here, that it's just got through saying it is fascinating with these individuals and how they respond to this, and the level of uh, just hardness of heart and delusion that these people have, that cannot recognize the truth of the matter. And so this man here, he's cast out of the synagogue. So what the parents were afraid of happening to them happens to this fellow who was healed. So 35 through 39, it says, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? He answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. Then he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. And Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. And so Jesus finds this man who was, and asks him, do you believe? He wants to, he says, well, who is he? Jesus says, I'm he. I am the Son of God. And we see where he says he believes and starts to worship. But notice what Jesus says here. He says, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. And so there's several times Jesus, in some aspects, he will say, I've, basically in some sense that he's not come to judge. And then some where in this case, he says that he's come for judgment. And yet what we see with him is that there's a separation of these two types of individuals here, that we see that those who do not see may see, and then those that see be made blind. And with this blind man, I think there is he's healed this man, so he was literally could not see. Now he can see, and so there's this physical curing of blindness, but there's a spiritual aspect here, and I think he's using the physical miracle, what would be on this man's mind, to make a point of a spiritual aspect, that this man just got through talking with the Pharisees, these leaders. They're saying, "Oh, you're born in sins. You're just worthless. You're a follower of this guy. We're just better than you." Is basically what they had been saying. But yet this man, who they would consider to be nothing, he understands the truth of the matter. He understands that Jesus is the Son of God. He understands that nobody could perform that miracle unless he is from God. He gets it. But yet we have the Pharisees, these Jewish leaders, who would be learned. They think that they got it figured out. They got their ticket punched to heaven. They're Moses' disciples. They're the best of the best. Those people are blind. And so we see the ones that are blind can now see, but the ones that can see or can claim that they see, they're made blind. And this is not some, this is not something in which God is just doing something supernaturally to these people in which they are just made blind, or or doing something supernaturally to this blind man to make him just believe. I think really what we see is the hearts of these men. We see the prideful hearts of the Jews, the Pharisees, and we do see this humbleness of this man, and the honesty of this blind man, that he can just accept these things for what they are, and he's putting these things together. But we have the Pharisees here who should understand, and yet we see their pride being brought out to the forefront, and we see the refusal for them to believe. So it takes us to the end of the chapter, verses 40 through 41. It says, "Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, 'Are we blind also?' Jesus said to them, 'If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see. Therefore, your sin remains.'" Jesus understands what their question is. They hear this, and they're thinking, "There's no way that we're blind. We're not in the blind category." And Jesus tells them, you are, you're claiming that you see, that you got it figured out, and so you're going to be held responsible for what you're doing. You're admitting that you're not acting in ignorance of anything. Therefore, you're going to bear the consequences of that. And so we see this aspect of judgment here as well. He says, I've come into this world for judgment. We just seen that at the end of verse 39. And so he's going to be judging who is blind and who is not, who's going to have their sins forgiven and who's not. Here, their sin is going to remain. Why? Because they claim that they see. They're not blind. They think that they have need of nothing. And so they're going to be held in judgment for that. And so that finishes up chapter 9. Again, if you got any questions or comments, even after we're done, leave them. I'll try to respond to them. And we also put these videos up on YouTube. Our YouTube page is, again, North Columbus Church of Christ. You can find us and subscribe to our page. And you can see all of our previous videos that we've uploaded there. But we'll just keep on working every Sunday evening. We'll just keep on working through John. And, eventually we'll get done. But I hope that this has been useful for everybody. And I hope that you all have a good day and a good rest of the week. Thanks.